This is the morning fix on Jusmen 105.7. I'm EDK, soundtracking the start of your day and keeping you in the know now. Tomorrow is the 30th of June. And if you've been following the news, it's the deadline for all illegal Africans in South Africa to leave. Now, there have been waves of some xenophobic attacks on other African nationals by some South Africans in the last few weeks. It's affected relations between some other African countries and South Africa. We've also seen some of these countries, including Nigeria, going to airlift citizens who want to voluntarily leave South Africa for their own safety. There's, however, more nuance to this. And offering this morning is Thebe Ikalafeng, Chairman of Brand Africa. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
All right, so there's a lot happening. You've actually published an article today titled "Africans Are Not South Africa's Problem, Failed Governments Are." Tell me the prompting for you to put pen to paper on that.
Well, if you think about it, the fact that South Africa has got so many foreign nationals of all colors, and from a continental perspective, it probably is the most diverse country in the continent. It gives you an idea that why are people coming? Why is everybody in South Africa? And there may be a reason. It could be economic, could be social, could be all those. But the bigger problem is why are there so many people illegal in South Africa? And if you look at the people who have been, quote, to be repatriated or evacuated, most of them don't even have papers. Most of them are illegal. They can't explain how they got into the country. Some of them just walked across the river from Zimbabwe, some from Lesotho, some from Malawi. I was watching last week, the Malawians, almost all of them had no papers to be in the country. So, but that is not, the problem is, there's a bigger problem is, why are they all here? There must be something wrong from where they come from. And it's a bigger African problem. It's a bigger African problem. Migration is a bigger African problem because our governments have failed to make it attractive for our citizens to stay home. The fact that there is a Nigerian in every single country in the world, and Nigerians would, at the first opportunity they get, they will leave Nigeria for a better opportunity somewhere, says something is not correct in our countries. And in South Africa, the fact that you have people out in the streets protesting against fellow Africans tells you there's something wrong in South Africa as well.
And, you know, you posited in this article, and I've read it, and I read it twice because it's really well written. But one of the things you talked about was the corruption within the immigration system in South Africa that has allowed for the unchecked fraud in the system. So how then do we manage the focus between migrants getting into the country illegally and the institutions that should uphold legal migration?
That's such an important point because, and that's why I say even in the paper that an illegal government has created a lawlessness in society. So if you have created lawlessness in society, you cannot now expect to hold citizens or even the visitors or even the investors or even the foreign nationals accountable in your country. If you're willing to sell immigration, a passport or a work permit or to anybody who may not even qualify under any other circumstances, if you're willing to sell it for $35, then there must be something wrong with the country. I think if you look at South Africa's challenge, for example, over almost $300 million in fraud that has been conducted in the system by South African public servants have exacerbated the problem. I don't think they've created a problem. I think they've exacerbated the problem. There was already a problem of illegal migrancy, but now there's a problem there's a problem that the system itself has enabled that illegality. And there's also other problem in the system. The other problem in the system are some people arrive as legals and they become illegal while they're here because their passports is stuck at the system. Their application is stuck in the system in Home Affairs and has not been processed for months, for weeks, for years, some of them for years. So ultimately they become illegal. Yes, there will be those who also come here with the intentions of not leaving again, but hoping that they will regularize their stay here at some stage. But unfortunately, because of the leak and the inefficiencies and sometimes the criminal behavior in the system, that the people then become illegal formally down the road.
Now, this isn't the first time African countries have experienced tensions over migration. Even as you mentioned in your paper, we've seen instances involving Ghana, involving us here in Nigeria, we branded a whole bag, Ghana must go as a result sometime in the 80s. Cote d'Ivoire has experienced theirs. Sudan has incredible problems here with displaced people and so on. Why does Africa seem to keep repeating the cycle, and how can we stop?
Africa repeats the cycle of displacements, of people displacements internally and externally, because African governments individually have not been able to create an enabling environment for its own citizens to find peace by being in their own countries. And yes, there will be a percentage that travels anyway. There will be a percentage that will want to move and practice their skills everywhere, and that's normal migration. But the second bigger problem is that collectively as a continent is one has to ask the question from an African Union perspective. Is it just a collection of governments that get together to shake hands, or is it a union that has got the teeth and ability to be able to direct some of the decisions which are important to move this continent forward? I think it's a good thing that, for example, Ghana went to the AU and put it down and says, you need to deal with South Africa, because they don't need to deal with South Africa. It actually highlights a bigger problem. They need to deal with the bigger problem. You cannot explain that in over 60 years of the African Union, we have not been able to create an environment that makes it attractive for citizens to stay in their countries. And also, but when there are issues like war, for example, when it comes to wars and unrest and all those, yes, they create a migration that perhaps is not catalyzed by people wanting economic opportunities elsewhere. You look at Ethiopia, for example. There's internal migration in Ethiopia between the tribal wars. Probably you look at Mali, you look at Libya, you look at all those. So, and much of that migration is very well understood, because nobody wants to be in an unstable country, if you will. If there's war and there's unrest and all those, people need to move. They need to be settled. At the lowest level, every government must provide for food, a roof overhead, and security for its citizens. It is the basic requirement of every government. And its failure to do that creates a crisis in migration, and which is what you've seen. This problem will not be solved one country at a time. It will be solved collectively as a continent. If you look at 1963, when the 32 presidents got together to form the OAU, one of the fundamental goals that they set for themselves was security for the continent. But we still don't have security for the continent. We still rely on America calling us to go to have coffee between DRC and Rwanda to go to, and then in exchange they take our minerals. You still have us running to the United Nations. If you land in many of our countries, I don't know if you've seen, because I've been to every country, so I have a perspective about this. So if you land into some of our countries, as you come down the airport, you see United Nations aeroplanes. They're either going to do one of two things. They're either coming to feed us, or they're coming to secure us. It is unacceptable. To me, it is not only a country problem, but it is a continental problem.
Thank you very much for the position. And just to wrap up, if there's a lesson that you hope South Africa and indeed the rest of Africa, which you've been to, which is a very remarkable feat, by the way, I should add, rest of Africa needs to take away from this moment here, what would that lesson be after June 30?
June 30 is tomorrow. It's going to come and it's going to go. South Africa is not going to have necessarily more jobs for its own citizens. They're not going to have necessarily more services for its citizens, because the infrastructure, the architecture of the economy is not correct. I think if there's a lesson to take out of all this here is, maybe let me say this first before I even go to that point. And the second important thing for me is, I think South Africans deserve secure borders. They deserve services. They deserve a government that cares for them. But equally, foreign nationals in South Africa, illegal or legal, deserve to be treated with humanity. They deserve to be protected. They deserve to be treated as fellow Africans. If there is a lesson to be had here for all of us, actually, and maybe in particular South Africa, is this continent is not going to move forward unless us as Africans come together as Africans and understand our joint brotherhood and humanity is what's going to take us forward. The enemy is not our fellow Africans. The enemy is the fact that we take out $150 million of import, $150 million of food every year in a continent that's got 68% arable land. Those are jobs that are being exported. The problem here is we're exporting minerals and critical minerals instead of keeping them here and beneficiating and creating opportunities. Those are jobs. That's security. That's why our nationals are leaving. The problem is, thank God to people like Dangote now who are building a $20 billion refinery. But the problem for a long time is that you have the oil in here, but you have to go refine it somewhere else and then come back at a premium, make it inaccessible for the citizens to be able to move their cars to light up their generations. The lessons here is for Africa to move forward, Africa must realize that we have a joint destiny as a people and as a continent.
Thank you very much, Thebe Ikalafeng, Chairman of Brand Africa, joining us on the Morning Fix.